Beneath a moon that wept silver tears upon the frozen earth, the last wolf of her bloodline staggered into the endless white. Ilara's breath came in ragged gasps, each one a betrayal of the warmth she had once known. The wind clawed at her fur-tattered cloak, whipping snowflakes like shards of forgotten promises across her vision. She had been cast out at dawn, the alpha of her pack, her mate, her betrayer declaring her barren, unworthy of the moon's grace. "No pups, no place," he had snarled, his eyes cold as the iron chains that bound her wrists before they shoved her beyond the wards. The pack's howls had faded into the storm, not in sorrow, but in relief, as if her exile cleansed them of some ancient shame. Now, the world was a vast, indifferent tomb. The mountains of Eldridge loomed like jagged teeth, their peaks crowned with ice that gleamed under the luna's unblinking gaze. Ilara's bare feet bled into the snow, leaving a trail of crimson petals that the wind eagerly devoured. She clutched the one remnant of her life before the fall. A locket of hammered silver, its chain snapped but still warm against her chest from the fever of her rage. Inside, a lock of her mother's hair, stained with the blood of the night her pack was first torn asunder, not by wolves, but by shadows that drank the life from veins under cover of endless winter. The vampires. Whispers of their clan had haunted the borders for generations. Pale lords who ruled the shadowed vales to the east, their hunger a curse from the Deusa herself for some primordial sin. Ilara's pack had warred with them once, a futile clash that left her family slaughtered, their blood spilled to fertilize the frost-bitten fields. She had been a child then, hidden in the roots of an ancient pine, listening to the wet sounds of throats being torn and the guttural feasts that followed. Her father's final howl had been a plea to the moon, unanswered. Hunger gnawed at her now, sharper than the cold. She had not eaten since the rejection rite, when the pack elders forced bitterroot down her throat to purge her defective essence. Omega blood, they called it, too soft, too yielding for the harsh laws of survival. But Ilara felt no softness in her veins, only fire, banked but unquenched. The locket pulsed against her skin as if the blood within it stirred, a symbol of the vengeance she swore in the silence of her cell. She would not die here, forgotten. She would return, not as the broken mate, but as the blade that severed the traitor's throat. And the vampires? They would pay first for the ghosts they left in her wake. The storm thickened, visibility shrinking to a veil of white fury. Ilara stumbled into a ravine, its walls sheer and glistening with rime. The air grew heavier, laced with the metallic tang of blood, not hers, but fresh, mingling with the scent of pine resin and something darker, like earth disturbed after a grave robbing. She froze, ears straining against the wind's wail. A low groan echoed from the shadows ahead, not animal, but laced with a pain that twisted her gut. There, slumped against a boulder half buried in snow, lay a figure that defied the night. Tall, broad-shouldered, clad in a cloak of midnight velvet frayed at the edges, his skin pale as the moon's underbelly. Crimson stained his lips, but it was his own, a gash across his throat, barely knit, oozing in the cold. His eyes, when they fluttered open, burned with an amber glow, not the feral gold of her kind, but something ancient, predatory, a vampire, not just any. The signet ring on his finger bore the crest of House Draven, princes of the shadowed clans, rulers who wedded politics with bloodlust. He was no mere scout. The torque of gold around his neck marked him as royalty, etched with runes that hummed faintly, as if warding off death itself. Ilara's instincts screamed to flee, to let the wolves' ancient enemy bleed out in the snow. Yet her body betrayed her, a pull deep in her core, like the moon tugging at tides. Omega senses attuned to the broken, the lost. He was wounded, not just flesh, but soul. Guilt radiated from him like heat from a dying fire, mingling with the storm's chill. "Who approaches?" His voice was a rasp. Elegant even in agony, carrying the lilt of forgotten courts. He tried to rise, but collapsed, his hand pressing the wound, fingers slick with his own life. Ilara hesitated, the locket burning hotter now, as if the blood inside recognized kin in his suffering. Vengeance whispered, "End him. Avenge the pack in this frozen nowhere." But the Deuce's light filtered through the clouds, casting his face in ethereal silver, revealing scars not of battle, but of chains, marks of a throne that bound tighter than iron. She stepped closer, against every rational scream in her mind. The wind howled a warning, distant uivos answering from the peaks, but she knelt, tearing a strip from her cloak to press against his throat. "Not your enemy," she murmured, though lies tasted like ash. "Not yet." His gaze locked on hers, amber depths swirling with suspicion, and a flicker of something deeper. Recognition? The connection sparked, instinctive, unwanted, like embers in the snow. Fear coiled in her chest, curiosity its treacherous twin. What curse had felled a prince here, in wolf territory? And why did her hand tremble not from cold, but from the warmth of his blood seeping through the fabric? The storm raged on, burying their tracks, as if the moon herself conspired to bind their fates in ice and shadow. Ilara's exile had just begun, but in that moment, with the vampire's breath mingling hers, she sensed the first fracture in her solitary path, a redemption neither sought, forged in the crucible of mutual ruin. The wind's fury softened to a mournful whisper as Ilara bound the vampire's wound, her fingers slick with the chill of his blood mingling with her own. It was darker than hers, thicker, carrying the faint copper tang of ancient earth and forbidden nights. The locket at her throat thrummed like a second heartbeat, its silver surface warming against the frost, as if the dried blood within recognized the spill before her, an echo of old losses, binding her to this stranger in ways she could not name. He watched her through half-lidded eyes, that amber gaze piercing the veil of her resolve. Up close, his features were carved from marble and shadow, high cheekbones shadowed by stubble like raven's wings, lips pale yet curved in a ghost of aristocratic poise. The torques around his neck gleamed dully, its runes flickering like dying stars, but it was the signet ring that drew her eye, a band of obsidian etched with a coiled serpent, devouring its tail. House Draven. The name slithered through her mind, conjuring memories of her father's tales, princes who bartered souls for power, clans that feasted on the weak to fuel their eternal thrones. Why? His voice rasped again, deeper now, laced with the gravel of pain suppressed. He shifted, wincing as the makeshift bandage pulled taut. A wolf, aiding the night walker. The moon mocks us both. Ilara's hand stilled, her breath catching in the frigid air. Fear bloomed in her chest, sharp as the thorns of winter rose, but beneath it stirred curiosity, insidious and warm. She should have left him to the snow's embrace, let the Dusa claim another monster from the shadows that had ravaged her kin. Yet here she knelt, in the heart of exile, drawn by the raw vulnerability in his stare, a crack in the predator's facade that mirrored her own shattered pride. "Mercy isn't weakness," she whispered, more to herself than to him, "even for your kind." He chuckled, a low, bitter sound that vibrated through the stone. "Mercy? From an omega cast out like chaff? You reek of rejection, little wolf. The pack's scent clings to you like a curse." His words struck true, igniting the embers of her shame. How did he know? Vampires sensed bloodlines, she recalled, echoes of pain woven into veins. She pulled back, the connection fraying like frost on glass. Instinctive pull, warring with the instinct to flee. The ravine deepened around them, walls closing in like the jaws of some primordial beast. Distant uivos pierced the dusk, not her packs, but wilder, lonelier calls from the peaks, warnings or summons she could not tell. The vampire, Draven, she assumed, for who else would bear such marks? pushed himself upright, leaning against the boulder with labored grace. "I am Thorn Draven," he said, as if the name were a shield. "Heir to the Crimson Spire, and you. You bear the mark of eldritch wolves. Why wander alone, fleeing a mate's blade?" Her jaw tightened, the locket's chain biting into her skin. "Exiled," she admitted, voice steady despite the storm within. "Barren," they called me. "Unfit." The word tasted of bile, but saying it aloud loosened its grip, like confessing to the moon herself. Thorn's eyes narrowed, not in pity, but understanding, a shared exile, perhaps, from duties that devoured the soul. "I know exile," he murmured, gaze drifting to the horizon where the luna dipped low, painting the snow in hues of bruised silver. "My clan. We war not just with wolves, but among ourselves. A rival house seeks my throne, poisoned whispers turning kin to traitors. I fled here to rally shadows, but their blade found me first." His hand ghosted over the wound, fingers tracing the edge where flesh knit unnaturally slow. Vampire resilience, she knew, but even they could falter under silver or spite. Curiosity clawed at her caution. Why confess to an enemy? The pull intensified, a thread of empathy weaving through the fear, born of their mutual ruin. She saw it in him then, the melancholy of a king, unbroken, yet bowed, guilt etching lines around his eyes like runes of remorse. What burdens did a prince carry that bled him into wolflands? And why did her omega instincts, scorned by her pack, yearn to mend what others had rent? A crack echoed through the ravine, ice shifting, or footsteps. Thorn tensed, his body coiling like a spring despite the injury. "They're coming," he growled, amber eyes flashing to predatory slits. "My pursuers, you must go, run to your borders." But Alara did not move. The locket pulsed hotter, the blood within a reminder of her own ghosts, the vampires who had slaughtered her family, leaving her to swear vengeance on altars of snow. Yet Thorn was no faceless fiend. He was broken, like her, marked by choices that scarred deeper than fangs. The connection denied itself no longer, curiosity blooming into something perilously close to alliance. "Not without knowing if you'll live to regret this night," she said, helping him to his feet. His weight against her was solid. Cold fire, his scent of night-blooming jasmine and iron flooding her senses. Together they stumbled deeper into the ravine's embrace, the wind rising to cloak their flight. Shadows lengthened, the moon bearing witness as fear and curiosity forged the first fragile links of their bond. Ilara's heart raced, not just from the chase, but from the dawning truth. In aiding him, she aided herself, stepping from exile's abyss toward an uncertain refuge. The snow swallowed their steps, but the locket's warmth promised that some wounds, shared, might yet heal. As the howls grew nearer, mingling with the guttural snarls of unseen foes, they pressed on, two exiles bound by the night's reluctant mercy. And now? I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The ravine's shadows deepened into a labyrinth of ice-sheathed stone, where the wind's howl twisted into echoes of pursuit, mocking their fragile alliance. Alara's arm burned under Thorn's weight, his body a pillar of chilled marble against her side, each step sending jolts of his unnatural cold seeping through her cloak. The locket at her throat thrummed relentlessly now, its silver casing slick with sweat and melting snow, the congealed blood inside pulsing like a vein exposed to the moon's indifferent gaze. It anchored her, this relic of her family's slaughter, a reminder that trust was a blade turned inward, yet here she was, propping up the very enemy whose kin had feasted on her bloodline. Thorn's breath rasped in rhythm with hers, labored but steadying, the wound at his throat already knitting with vampiric tenacity, though silver-laced daggers left scars that lingered like regrets. Deeper, he urged, voice a low rumble that vibrated through her bones. There's a cleft ahead, old smuggler's hollow, veiled by wards my house once etched. His amber eyes scanned the gloom, predatory instincts sharpening despite the pain, and Ilara glimpsed the king beneath the fugitive. A strategist born of shadowed courts, where betrayal was as common as the crimson tides of full moons. She nodded, ignoring the ache in her limbs, the way her bare feet numbly carved paths through the snow. Exile had stripped her of pack, of mate, but not of survival's grim poetry, the knowledge that vulnerability could be a weapon, honed in silence. The howls behind them swelled, not wolves now, but something fouler, guttural snarls laced with the hiss of undead thralls, House Vesper's lesser spawn, bound by blood oaths to rival princes. Thorn had spoken of them in fragments during their flight, traitors within his clan, poisoning the Crimson Spire's veins with ambitions that mirrored her own pack's rot. A common enemy, perhaps, in this frozen no-man's land where wolf and vampire borders bled into one another. They stumbled into the cleft, a narrow fissure yawning like a wound in the mountain's flank. Thorn pressed a palm to the ice-crusted wall, murmuring words in an ancient tongue that tasted of ash and eternity. Runes flickered to life, faint blue veins glowing against the stone, then faded as an illusion of solid rock shimmered into place. A veil thin as spider silk, but enough to buy them breath. Inside, the hollow unfolded. A shallow cave, its floor dusted with frost, walls etched with faded sigils of forgotten pacts. A trickle of meltwater wept from a crack overhead, pooling in a basin that reflected the luna's pale light like a shattered mirror. Ilara eased Thorn down against the far wall, her hands lingering on his shoulders longer than necessary, tracing the frayed edges of his velvet cloak. Empathy stirred unbidden, a warmth uncoiling in her chest amid the chill, a recognition of wounds that mirrored her own. His guilt was palpable, radiating like the heat of banked embers, not for the lives his kind had taken, but for the throne that demanded them. "You fight your own," she said softly, kneeling to build a small fire from scavenged tinder, dry moss and splintered bone from some long-dead beast. The flames caught reluctantly, casting dancing shadows that painted his face in gold and regret. Like my alpha, selling us to shadows for power. Thorn's gaze met hers across the fire's glow, amber depths swirling with the storm's remnants. Power is a chain, little wolf, forged in blood, worn by fools who mistake it for freedom. He extended a hand, not to touch, but to offer a strip of dried meat from his pouch. Venison, scent-marked with herbs that spoke of southern vales, far from this northern waste. She hesitated, the locket's pulse quickening, then took it, their fingers brushing in a spark of unintended intimacy. The contact sent a shiver through her. Not revulsion, but something deeper, a bond forging in the crucible of shared peril, empathy weaving threads where enmity had frayed. Outside, the snarls grew bolder, claws scraping stone as the thralls tested the veil. One burst through, a hulking brute, eyes milky with undeath, fangs elongated in mindless hunger. It lunged, but Thorn was faster, rising with a fluidity that belied his injury. He seized its throat, twisting with a crack that echoed like thunder in the confined space. Black ichor sprayed, staining the snow red-black, and Ilara surged forward, her omega instincts flaring into action. She drove a jagged rock into its side, twisting until the creature slumped, its final hiss bubbling into silence. Blood, theirs, mingled on her skin, warm and viscous, the locket absorbing the metallic tang like a talisman drinking in the night's confessions. Panting, they collapsed back, the fire's warmth a fragile barrier against the cold seeping in. Thorn wiped ichor from his face, his expression softening as he studied her. "You fight like one born to it, not cast aside." The words pierced her, unraveling the knot of shame she'd carried since the rejection rite. For the first time, the pull between them felt less like instinct's betrayal and more like choice, a deliberate step toward something redemptive, where her softness was strength, his predation tempered by remorse. Ilara met his eyes, the flames reflecting in them like stars in amber. "And you bleed like one who regrets the feast." Vulnerability hung between them, thick as the smoke curling upward, empathy blooming into a tentative bond. The thrall's distant howls retreated, thwarted for now, but the night whispered of greater storms, her pack's traitors, his clan's betrayals, converging like wolves to a kill. In this refuge, forged of ice and fire, Ilara felt the first stirrings of alliance. Not love, not yet, but a shared fire against the encroaching dark. The locket cooled against her chest, its bloodstain a silent vow. Vengeance would come, but perhaps not alone. As the moon climbed higher, bathing the cave in silver, Thorn's hand found hers in the shadows, a grip born of necessity, hinting at the redemption neither had sought. The wind outside mourned their isolation, but within, the embers of trust flickered, fragile yet unquenched. The cave's fragile sanctuary trembled under the weight of encroaching dawn, its walls weeping rivulets of meltwater that traced silver paths like veins exposed to the moon's fading caress. Ilara sat huddled by the dying fire, its embers casting erratic shadows across Thorn's form, where he rested against the stone, his amber eyes half closed in vigilant repose. The locket nestled between her breasts felt heavier now, its chain a noose of memory, the congealed blood within stirring as if awakened by the night's confessions. Their hands had parted reluctantly after the thrall's defeat, but the echo of his touch lingered, a cold spark that thawed something deep within her, unbidden and perilous. Sleep evaded her, the omega senses that her pack had scorned now hyper-aware. The rhythmic hush of Thorn's breath, not quite human, laced with the subtle rhythm of undeath. The distant drip of water pooling in the basin, mirroring the slow knit of his wound. The faint, acrid scent of ichor mingling with the smoke, a reminder of battles shared and blood spilled in unlikely unity. Empathy had rooted in her chest during their flight, transforming fear into a tentative bridge. But now, as the luna's light filtered through cracks in the veil, doubt gnawed at the edges. He was vampire royalty, heir to a throne built on the bones of her kin. How could mercy bind what history had severed? Thorn stirred, his gaze finding hers across the gloom, sharp and searching. "The fire fades, little wolf, as does our respite." His voice was velvet over gravel, the pain in his throat subdued but present, a raw edge that humanized the predator. He shifted, wincing as he probed the bandage, now crusted with dried blood, his and the thrall's, a commingled stain that the flames had seared into dark filigree. Outside, the wind had stilled to an ominous hush. The howls retreated, but not silenced, as if the mountain itself held its breath, awaiting revelation. Ilara rose, knees protesting the cold stone, and knelt by the basin. She cupped water to her lips, the chill biting like accusation, then splashed it over her face, washing away the grime of their struggle. The locket slipped from her cloak, dangling free, its surface catching the ember light in a prismatic gleam. As her fingers brushed it, a jolt coursed through her, not pain, but a surge, like lightning threading her veins. The blood inside heated, viscous and alive, pulsing in time with her heart. Visions flickered at the edges of her sight. Not memories, but fragments of futures unwritten. Shadowed spires rising from mist-shrouded veils. Wolves circling under a blood moon, a union forged in crimson vows. She gasped, dropping to her knees, the basin's water sloshing over the rim in frozen ripples. Thorn was at her side in an instant, his hand steadying her shoulder, cool as marble yet grounding. "What plagues you?" Concern etched his features, the king's melancholy surfacing in the furrow of his brow, guilt's shadow deepening the lines of his ancient youth. The locket burned against her palm, its chain coiling like a serpent awakening. Ilara's breath hitched as the visions coalesced, no longer fleeting but insistent. Her pack's betrayal unveiled, not barrenness, but a hidden strength, an omega gift suppressed by fear. Pathfinder blood, attuned to the Deuce's threads of fate. She saw Thorn's throne, crumbling under Vesper's poison, his clan avenged, not by fang, but by alliance with the Wild Ones. And at the center, a marriage, her hand in his, rings of iron and silver binding vengeance to redemption, her pack's ghosts laid to rest in the spill of vampire blood, his wounds healed by the moon's forgiving light. It speaks, she whispered, voice trembling with the weight of unveiling. The locket's blood had stirred her dormant power, a seer's intuition woven into her veins since the night her family fell. A gift her alpha had branded curse, fearing what it revealed of his own treacheries. Now it manifested raw and unrelenting, the cave filling with an ethereal glow, moonlight bending through the veil to illuminate the relic like a beacon. Symbols etched themselves in frost on the walls, a wolf entwined with a serpent, paths converging under lunar witness. Thorn's eyes widened, amber flaring as he traced the visions in her gaze, his vampiric senses attuned to the arcane. He released her shoulder, but not before the connection deepened, a flood of shared insight binding them. He saw it too, his destiny's key, not in shadowed packs, but in this exiled omega, her bloodline the bridge between eternal night and wild dawn. Guilt twisted in his expression, the weight of his clan's sins crashing against the hope her gift offered. "You are the Pathfinder," he murmured, awe threading his tone, laced with the sorrow of realization. "The Deuce's chosen, hidden in rejection's shroud. My clan's fall. It hinges on you. Vengeance for your pack, redemption for mine, through union, not war." Ilara recoiled, the locket cooling as the visions faded, leaving her hollowed by truth. The gift was no blessing, but a chain, demanding she wed the enemy to avenge her blood, her freedom bartered for fate's cruel design. Tears froze on her lashes, the fire's last embers mirroring the conflict in her soul. Compassion warring with the fire of old wounds, her softness now a weapon that could crown or condemn. Thorn's hand hovered near hers, offering solace amid the revelation storm, his own destiny refracted through her eyes, a king perceiving his salvation in the one he should destroy. The cave seemed smaller now, the veil thinning as dawn's gray light pierced the illusions. Distant snarls resumed, closer, insistent, but the true confrontation brewed within. Could she embrace this path, where love's seeds sprouted in vengeance's soil? The locket lay still, its blood a silent oracle, whispering that strength lay not in denial, but in the mercy of acceptance. Thorn watched her, his melancholy gaze a mirror to her turmoil, the bond between them no longer fragile, but forged in the fires of destiny's unyielding call. As the first rays clawed at the shadows, Ilara clutched the locket, its warmth a promise and a prison, the mountain's silence broken only by their shared breath. Two souls on the precipice of revelation's irreversible tide. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw your worth. The dawn's pallid fingers clawed through the veil, shattering the cave's fragile illusions like glass under a hammer's blow. Ilara's vision lingered in the afterglow of the locket's revelation, the blood within it now a dormant ember against her skin, its chain a tether to truths she could neither embrace nor sever. Thorn stood beside her, his silhouette etched in the gray light, the torque around his neck catching the first hints of sun like a warning flare. The air thickened with the scent of impending storm, ozone and pine, undercut by the metallic bite of blood from the night's skirmishes. Her heart pounded, a wild drum echoing the distant thunder rolling from the peaks, as the snarls outside swelled into a chorus of retribution. They emerged from the cleft into a world reborn in frost, the ravine transformed by the night's melt into a treacherous sluice of ice and shadow. Thorn's hand brushed hers in parting the veil, a fleeting anchor that sent ripples through her core. Empathy hardened into resolve, yet laced with the thorns of doubt. The Pathfinder's gift had unveiled her role, not victim, but fulcrum, her union with this vampire prince, the key to avenging her pack's slaughter and mending his clan's fractured throne. But choice loomed like the mountains themselves, unyielding and vast. Love as a weapon, or freedom in solitary vengeance? The locket warmed faintly, as if urging her forward, its blood a whisper of the Deuce's inexorable will. The pursuers crested the ridge before them, a ragged phalanx silhouetted against the bruised sky. 5 thralls of House Vesper, their forms twisted parodies of life, eyes glowing with the fever of blood oaths. At their flank loped 2 wolves, scouts from her own pack, their fur matted with the grime of border patrols, eyes narrowing in recognition as they scented her exile's shame. Among them, striding with predatory arrogance, was Kale, her former mate, the alpha whose rejection had branded her barren. His pelt gleamed silver in the dawn, but his gaze was fevered, shadowed by the same ambition that had driven him to whisper pacts with the vampires years ago, trading wolf lives for scraps of power. "Alara," Kyle snarled, his voice a guttural command that once stirred her blood to submission. Now it curdled it, the locket pulsing hot against her chest like a counterpoint to his betrayal. "The moon's whore returns, dragging shadows into our hunt. You've fallen far, Omega, bedding the leech that slew our kin?" Thorn tensed beside her, his body coiling into lethal grace, fangs elongating in the light as amber eyes locked on the wolves. Guilt flickered in his posture, the weight of his clan's sins manifesting in the subtle tremor of his hand. Centuries of feasts on the innocent, now confronted in the flesh of this woman's pain. "She aids me," he said, voice resonant with the authority of shadowed halls, "as I would aid her against traitors like you. Your pacts with Vesper reek of desperation, Wolf. The Crimson Spire knows your scent." The air crackled with tension, wind whipping snow into veils that stung like accusations. Alara stepped forward, her bare feet crunching ice, the cold grounding her amid the whirlwind of emotions. The pack's howls had haunted her exile, but here they stood, not saviors, but executioners. Kale's ambition the root that had poisoned her bloodline. Visions from the locket resurfaced unbidden. Kale's clandestine meetings under blood moons, bartering her family's lives to Vesper spies for a share of eternal power. His fear of her emerging gift driving the rejection right. Rage bloomed in her chest, hot and visceral. Mingling with the chill of betrayal, the man who had claimed her as mate now sought to end her, lest her Pathfinder sight expose his rot. A thrall lunged first, its claws raking the air with a hiss that split the dawn. Thorn met it mid-leap, seizing its arm and twisting with a snap that echoed off the stones, black ichor spraying across the snow in crimson arcs. Alara dodged a wolf scout's pounce, her Omega agility, scorned as weakness, now a blade's edge, rolling to snatch a fallen dagger from the thrall's belt, its silver hilt burning her palm. She drove it into the scout's flank, twisting until a yelp pierced the fray, blood, hot, familiar, wolf blood, splattering her face like tears unshed. The metallic tang flooded her senses, the locket absorbing it, amplifying her visions. Paths diverging, Kyle's throne crumbling if she chose forgiveness over fangs, or war birthing endless night. Kyle circled her, eyes gleaming with possessive fury, his form shifting to half man, half beast in the heat of challenge. "You were mine to discard," he growled, lunging with jaws wide. She parried, the dagger glancing off his shoulder, drawing a line of red that steamed in the cold. Thorn fought at her side, dispatching another thrall with a precise strike to the throat, his movements a dance of lethal elegance, but his gaze flicked to her constantly, protection born of budding alliance, guilt etching deeper with each wolf he felled. "End this," he urged through gritted teeth, "for your pack's true honor, not his lies." The confrontation crested in a maelstrom of fur, fang, and frost. Ilara faced Kale alone as Thorn subdued the last Vesper spawn, their blood pooling to form a frozen mosaic under the climbing sun. He pinned her against a boulder, breath hot on her neck, claws pricking her skin. "Join me again," he whispered, voice laced with false tenderness, "or die as the barren outcast you are. The vampires will consume us all if we don't unite under my lead." But the locket surged, its blood igniting her veins with clarity. The Deuce's moral forge, demanding choice. Forgiveness? A path where Kale's treachery was exposed, his pack redeemed through truth, sparing the innocent from war's maw. Or freedom in vengeance, slaying him here, unleashing cycles of blood that would drown both clans? Love's shadow loomed in Thorn's watchful eyes, a redemption that asked her to wed not just for revenge, but for the healing of wounds deeper than flesh. Her hand trembled on the dagger, pressed to Kale's chest, the wind howling a dirge for the fallen scouts, their bodies cooling in the snow. "Mercy is the true Alpha's strength," she breathed, echoing the philosophy that had sustained her exile, but her voice cracked with the weight of it. Kale's eyes widened in betrayal as she twisted the blade, not to kill, but to wound, carving a sigil from her visions, the wolf-serpent bond, marking him for judgment by his own. He howled, recoiling, blood flowing free as the remaining pack scents fled into the peaks, leaving him staggered and exposed. Thorn approached, offering a hand slick with ichor, his expression a tapestry of relief and sorrow. The king's melancholy deepened by the lives lost, yet lifted by her choice. Ilara took it, the connection electric, her freedom bartered not for chains, but for a higher war, against the true traitors, Vesper and the pack's hidden rot. The locket cooled, its blood sated, but the dilemma lingered in her soul. Had mercy crowned her, or merely delayed the storm? As they turned from the ravine, the sun breaking fully over the horizon, painting the bloodied snow in gold, Ilara felt the precipice of Renascimento, where forgiveness and war intertwined like lovers in the Deusa's eternal dance. The wind carried their scents away, but the ethical fracture in her heart echoed louder than any howl. A spiritual crossroads where love's proof demanded everything and promised rebirth. The sun's ascent painted the ravine in strokes of molten gold, turning the bloodied snow into a canvas of fleeting glory, where crimson blooms wilted under the Deusa's warming gaze. Ilara's hand remained clasped in Thorn's. Their mingled blood, wolf and vampire, drying into a fragile seal against the chill that lingered in her bones. The locket at her throat hung heavy, its silver surface etched with the morning's light, the congealed blood within now a quiet sentinel, sated by the choice she had forged in Kale's howl of defeat. Mercy had not slain him, but it had stripped him bare. The sigil she carved into his flesh a brand of truth that would summon his pack's judgment, unraveling the traitor's web without her hands forever stained by kinblood. Yet the act left her hollow, the wind's sigh carrying echoes of the scout's final breaths, a dirge for the innocents lost to ambition's shadow. They crested the ridge in silence, the mountains unfolding like the pages of an ancient tome, their peaks veiled in mist that swirled like spirits unbound. Thorn's presence beside her was a constant, his steps measured to match her weary gait, the torque around his neck glinting as a reminder of thrones contested and clans fractured. His amber eyes, once guarded by melancholy's veil, now held a depth of quiet awe, the guilt that had shadowed him easing into something akin to hope. Fragile, untested, born of her revelation and the moral fire she had kindled. "You chose the harder path," he murmured, his voice a low timbre that resonated through the crisp air, carrying the scent of pine resin and distant rain. "Not vengeance's blade, but truth's light, my clan. They will see in you what I do, a bridge, over the abyss. Ilara's chest tightened, the locket pulsing faintly as if echoing his words, its warmth seeping into her skin like a lover's breath. The Pathfinder's gift had unveiled not just fates, but the cost of them. Her exile's pain transmuted into power, her rejection a forge for compassion that could heal what war had rent. But rebirth demanded sacrifice, and as they descended into the shadowed vales bordering vampire lands, the weight of it pressed upon her, to wed this prince not in passion's haste, but as a vow of redemption, binding her pack's ghosts to his clan's renewal. Love was no reward here, but proof, a deliberate union to avenge the fallen, her bloodline's slaughter answered by the fall of House Vesper. His throne secured not by solitary rule, but by the moon's shared grace. The crimson spire loomed on the horizon, its spires piercing the clouds like fangs of obsidian and ivory, wreathed in eternal twilight despite the day's advance. Whispers of its halls reached them on the wind, the clamor of undead sentinels, the murmur of courtiers plotting in velvet-draped chambers, the undercurrent of blood rites that fueled the eternal night. Thorn's hand tightened in hers, a silent anchor as they approached the outer wards, where thorny vines of iron and silver coiled like serpents, guarding forbidden fruit. "My people await," he said, halting at the threshold, his gaze searching hers with the raw vulnerability of one who had tasted isolation's bite. "Vesper's poison spreads. Without alliance, the spire crumbles. But I would not bind you without your will, little wolf. Freedom remains yours. Walk away, and let the Dusa guide your solitary path." The choice fractured her anew, the locket flaring hot against her chest, visions flickering like embers in her mind's eye. A wedding under the blood moon. Rings forged from the sigils of wolf and serpent, her hand in his sealing pacts that toppled traitors. She saw her pack, reformed under new alphas untainted by Kale's rot, their borders safe from vampire hunger through vows of restraint. Thorn's clan, healed by her Pathfinder sight, their feasts turned from predation to protection, guilt's chains shattered in the light of mutual forgiveness. Yet the price, her Omega heart, once scorned, now yielding to a bond that transcended enmity, love emerging not as ecstasy, but as the quiet strength to sacrifice solitude for greater rebirth. Tears welled, freezing on her lashes like diamonds of resolve, the wind tugging at her cloak as if the Dusa herself urged her forward. "I choose union," she whispered, voice steady amid the storm within, stepping across the wards with him. The vines parted like obedient shadows, the air shifting to the heady perfume of night-blooming jasmine and smoldering incense. Within the spire's grand hall, vampires gathered, pale nobles in silks of deepest crimson, their eyes gleaming with suspicion and intrigue. At the altar of lunar stone, etched with runes of ancient pacts, Thorn's kin awaited. The air thick with the scent of beeswax candles and the faint, underlying tang of blood offerings. No grand ceremony marked their vows. Instead, a ritual intimate and raw, under the vaulted ceiling where moonlight filtered through crystal veins, casting prismatic halos. Thorn knelt before her, his signet ring removed, offered palm up as a symbol of surrender. "I wed you, Ilara of Eldridge, to avenge my clan and heal its wounds. In your light, I find redemption's path." His words wove through her soul, the melancholy in his tone lifting like mist before dawn, guilt yielding to the promise of shared burden. She placed her hand in his, the locket opening of its own accord, a single drop of the ancient blood falling to mingle with his upon the stone, a seal of the Dusa's blessing. "And I wed you, Thorndraven, to avenge my pack and birth our renewal. In your shadows, I claim my strength." The union sealed with a kiss, cold fire meeting warm resolve, their blood fusing in a glow that rippled through the hall, visions cascading for all to witness. Vesper's downfall in a tide of silver and fang, Kale's exposure under pack howls, borders redrawn in peace forged from pain. As the spire's bells tolled a somber peal, echoing into the valleys, Ilara felt the Renascimento take root. Sacrifice in yielding her freedom, healing in the mending of old scars, union as the ultimate proof of love's redemptive fire. The locket cooled to a gentle warmth, its blood now a bridge eternal, the moon above bearing witness to their rebirth. No longer exiles, but sovereigns of fate. They stood entwined, the wind outside whispering of storms quelled and dawns unbroken, where every wound healed into wisdom's quiet reign. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.